preserved my youth. Not only did it capture my goals, it told me the truth.
Conversate for a few, cause in a few
I let them know we missing you. The love is unconditional.
Wave your hands across the land if we family.
We got a world premiere right here, now get lost.
So off we go, let the trumpets blow. And hold on, because the driver of the mission is a pro.
I am going to, I think, just echo a lot of what Dr. Jones has already said. I thought about this question a lot too. I think social media and the media definitely play a part for sure. The media doesn't elevate stories about Black women in the same way. Stories about domestic violence, kidnapping, murder, they don't get the same level of media coverage or empathy in the same way that white women do. And even when you're on social media, the comments under a post when we're talking about Black women and violence, domestic violence, any of those things, there is still a lot of victim blaming under those posts when we're talking about Black women. Those comments are very different when we're talking about Black women than when we're talking about any other race of women. And so when you are a part of a group that is largely unprotected, it is very, very easy for your challenges to go unnoticed or uncared for. So I mean, I could repeat everything that Dr. Jones has already said. I think there's additional layers when we talk about invisibility or why Black women's trauma when we're talking about domestic violence is not, I don't know if I want to say elevated or cared for as much, but there's layers to domestic violence itself. So when we talk about it at the surface level. When we're talking about it in groups, we're talking about it at the surface level. We're on the outside looking in, right? And I heard this with even the Justin and Serena Fairfax conversation. Like, he was a good guy to you, right? We don't know what was happening in that home. We don't know what is happening in the home of an abuser. And domestic violence doesn't always just mean physical violence. It could also mean domestic control. There are layers and layers and layers to what it means and what it looks like. There's mental and emotional, physical, sexual, financial control and manipulation. So when we say that it still feels invisible, it can actually be because it is, right? Like, you might have someone listening right now who is in a domestic situation, a control situation, and maybe their partner's not physically violent or physically violent all the time or yet, but there might be other factors. And Dr. Jones can probably speak more to this. I'm not a therapist, but like, statistically, I think statistically that leads to them being physically violent at some point, right? And so maybe they're just not there yet. So when we talk about Black women being in situations where there's a domestic violence situation and why maybe it's not getting the attention it deserves, I don't think we're always looking at it holistically. And people often judge, right? Like, why am I helping her? She ain't ready to go back anyway. She's just, she might be just going back, but we don't know the circumstances that dictate why she's going back. Are there children involved? Are there financial consequences to her leaving? Abusers are really, really good at, playing the game, really, really good at being manipulative, really, really good at holding the purse strings and, I've got this thing on camera and I've got this, thing that's a thing that's going to manipulate the situation. And so we can't always be the judge of what is happening in someone's life. And I don't think we do enough listening to what is happening when people are maybe throwing out the signs that they are in an abusive relationship or saying that they're in an abusive relationship. We want to judge first. And I think that we need to stop doing that. And then sometimes we get to a place where, like we are now, it's too late. And by then we're saying, but he was such a great guy and we didn't see this coming. And sometimes you have people around you, you have the friends, like Dr. Jones was saying, that like, you did see this coming. You saw the signs, but you weren't the friend that was willing to hold that person accountable. There are people around you. You got the creepy friend that gets a little too handsy with women, and everybody's like, well, that's just such and such, and we can't do anything about it, but you can do something about it. You just have gotten to the place where I think we're unwilling to say things, but then we get to a situation like this where we don't want to be in a place where we're like, we could have prevented this thing from happening.
And what's particularly sad about this that there were signs.
Hmm.
Or knew that there was alcoholism on his part.
Yeah.
There was depression.
Hmm.
He had secretly purchased a firearm. They knew all these things. And I think they gave him like 2 weeks to leave the home. Why not just say, hey, listen, you got to go now? Or we'll send law enforcement to escort you there to get your stuff and then you leave. So the system let her down, let her children down. And I'm talking about Dr. Serena when I talk about this. But I want to go back to when y'all talk about little girls, little Black girls, and the inappropriate looks. I remember talking to a group of women who were friends of mine, and they were talking about somebody who was handsy, and they were talking about different situations. And they said it to me, and I sat there, and you two know me. And so my anger went towards them. And I said, well, wait, why the fuck you ain't tell me? Because I would have checked that. And their response was, you know what? We've been dealing with this for so long. Since we were little girls, we know how to handle it. And that's not right. It wasn't an acceptable answer for me. I feel like it's our duty to protect the women that we love, right? And there are some times when you do get frustrated. I've had family members who have been in, violent relationships where they were harming each other, and you tried to step in to defend, and next thing you know, they tag teaming you, right? I've literally been in that type of situation. So it's a difficult thing to address. But I think ultimately, like I said before, I'm a man's man, and I think you have to hold men accountable. I've been in relationships where it's been toxic and things weren't going our way, and things happen, and next thing you know, you're mad at each other, and it starts from angry words to now you're tussling, and none of that's appropriate. Nobody should be putting their hands on anybody. But I think there has to be a way for us to address, domestic violence in the Black community. So I asked you, LaFonda, where do we start? Because clearly we're not addressing it the right way, because our Black women, our Black children aren't safe. I mean, there's some other stories that happened this week where some men, they got mad because there was one particular situation. I don't know exactly where it's at, because honestly, I had to protect my own mental well-being. I really couldn't look at it, but this man killed like 7 children, 8 children, 7 of them were his, and he shot 2 women. And I'm just like, oh my God, it's so horrific.
Yeah.
And I kind of had to like protect my peace and not really dig deep into it. But where do we start in your opinion, LaFonda?
Well, I mean, you know how I feel about therapy, so I'm gonna say that. Um, I think that the one thing that I do appreciate that this is ignited is a conversation, a discussion around emotions and therapy. I think the first thing that we have to do is let go of the stigma of therapy, and let go of the stigma of men fully embracing and processing the full range of their emotions. What I've seen and what I know, is that what happens is that men are taught to only feel like indifference and anger, right? Those are the two emotions you're allowed to feel as a little boy. And then when life gets heavy, when you're an adult and things happen and something else is triggered, right? Jealousy, stress, burnout, consequences, you're not emotionally equipped to work through those moments because you haven't been taught to, you haven't practiced it. And so I think we're doing our community a disservice by not talking about what it means to be emotionally responsible, not just to ourselves, but I think we're emotionally responsible to each other. You just said like being in toxic, I've been in toxic relationships I don't think my ex-husband gonna listen to this podcast. Very toxic relationship. Somebody who was not taught or did not learn to process any other emotion except for indifference and rage. And so we have to learn to be emotionally emotionally responsible to each other. I've heard men say that, like, if I share something that's personal, if I share my emotions with, a woman, then like it gets laughed at or dismissed or it gets thrown back at me later. Like, stop doing that. You're only teaching each other not to share and process their emotions. You're teaching people that you are not a safe space for them, and that is not healthy. So, I think the places that we need to start are getting rid of the stigma of therapy and learning how to live in and express the full range of our emotions. And we have to be honest in our community as well. We just talked about this. We have those friends that we know are a little bit, ooh, they got an anger problem or they're handsy or whatever it is. And instead of pulling them to the side, we just sort of ignore it or push them, push it aside. And then why are we not having like you said, why are we not having a man-to-man conversation with them? What are the accountability measures that we're willing to take before someone else is a victim of that bad behavior?
Yeah, I think you made a lot of good points. The point about men opening up to women and it being weaponized against them is
Mm-hmm.
the point. If I'm honest, that is a real thing. It is something
Mm-hmm.
that keeps some guys from opening up. It makes some guys suggest to other men, don't open up to her because she's going to
Right.
against you in the future. And that's a generalized statement.
Mm-hmm.
There are people that you can be safe with.
Mm-hmm.
You two are my friends. I know that I'm safe with you all and I can open up, right? But I think it comes back to Black men and us holding each other accountable and us saying, hey, listen, you need to do better by that girl. Or listen, if you're not doing this, like I'm talking a lot about my fraternity. There's a chapter brother of mine who's not doing right by one of his kids.
Mm-hmm.
And me and a couple other men in the chapter who have influence say, listen, man, you can't be around us. You can't be around us if you are not handling your responsibilities as a man. And I don't know if all men are having that conversation. There's this, it comes up a lot, and I'm sorry for talking so much. When people say everybody knows a woman who's been abused, but nobody knows an abuser, right? And I've thought about that statement so much, and I realized that number one, if it was a parent, I don't think I know the men that live with the standard that I live with, and I hope the men that are in my circle don't embarrass me, right? We're not going for that. But when you talk about like psychological, sexual, financial, that type of abuse, we don't see how we are behind closed doors in relationships. So it's kind of difficult to address, right? But I think ultimately it comes back to us men holding each other accountable and saying, hey, listen, and not only holding each other accountable, but being safe spaces for our brothers too. Because I remember back in the day, like if I'm sensitive, if I wanted to cry about something that happened in a relationship, come on, man, you acting like a little hoe, bro. Like, whatever. But as we've grown and matured, I remember being in a situation, I called my best friend. I said, look, man, you might call me a hoe. He was like, nah, dude, that would hurt my feelings too. And thankfully, I have men in my life that say, hey, listen, something bad happened to you, cry it out.